Yo, what's up, your boy Ghost here. Today I'm bringing you guys another comparison video between the Type-100 and MP-40. And I know that I'm making a lot of MP-40 or just SMG comparisons, but listen, bro, the SMG just conversation in Warzone at the moment is just kind of crazy because I feel like there's so many SMGs that could be deemed good and are good. And, you know, trying to figure out which is the best is a little bit difficult, and, you know, hopefully these comparisons kind of help you narrow down your, I guess, opinion, or just narrow down your choice when it comes to picking an SMG. Now, granted, Warzone right now is in a really weird state, so I don't know if people really care too much, but we're making that content regardless. But yeah, man, before we do get into the comparison, I want to say if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. $1 to 2,000. We're about like less than 120 away. Also, if you guys can do me a favor of following me over on my Twitch channel, I tend to stream there every other day, or when I just have the time to. You know, grinding for content and whatnot. You know, go love a follow over there for your boy. And yeah, man, with that being said, though, let's get into this comparison. And here we have the recoil pattern for the Type-100. Now, I actually ended up using, or attempting to use this weapon about a week ago. If you guys remember the Owen gun video I made in Rebirth, that was the time I actually tried to make a Type-100 video, but I just could not figure out a good class up for it, because it was either ADS too slow, or maybe I did get the ADS speed, but it was a little bit too much recoil, or, you know, it was killing too slow. I just could not figure out a class setup, so I eventually decided to scrap that idea, went with the Owen gun instead, and, you know, that whatever happened with the Owen gun happened. And the Type, I just didn't really give him a chance until now. I wanted to go back to it because, if you guys are not aware, this weapon has actually been getting a lot of attention ever since it got buffed 1 or 2 updates ago. I'm not entirely sure how many updates it's been, but whenever like a bunch of weapon tuning happened, this Type actually ended up getting a buff, and people from that day have begun using this weapon a little bit more. Granted that MP-40 has been rising a lot more, in my opinion. I think the MP-40 is a little bit more popular at the moment, but the Type-100 I still see occasionally being used by top players and just players in general, and this gun is actually really, really solid. My only complaint that I have with this weapon is no matter what class setup I try, it just feels really slow. Like, I feel like you have to have a somewhat slow Type-100 for it to be actually good. Like, if I was to make this gun a little bit faster, it would suffer the fact that it just didn't kill fast enough, or it had a little bit too much recoil. And so I'm going to ask you guys, if you guys can give me a class setup that you think kills good and is pretty fast, let me have it, bro, because the class setup that I got, it's not actually mine. I looked it up because I knew I couldn't figure something out, so I just looked it up, and this is what I got. And it's not a bad class setup, but it's just a little bit too slow for my liking. I'm not saying things need to be extremely fast, but it just feels just slow, especially in comparison to an MP-40, where like that MP-40 is just cracked. You're zooming everywhere, aiming fast, and killing fast. Like, that weapon is perfect in every aspect, pretty much. The Type-100, really, really solid. I think it's a lot more closer to an MP-40 than a gun like PBSH is. Like how I made my last comparison, I think this gun is definitely a lot more closer to that MP-40 than a gun like PBSH or even a Tommy gun, because this gun is a little bit on the slower side of fire rate and has pretty decent damage. I'm not seeing the stats yet, so when we get into the stats a little bit later, we'll get a better understanding of how good this weapon is. But this gun, man, this thing does kill. This gun is amazing. It's just, it's too slow for me. And I like to play fast, I like to play really, really in people's faces, and sometimes that slowness, man, can get me killed. Like, I just feel kind of like bulky sometimes. You know, it's kind of weird saying that because it's an SMG, and, you know, you're not really supposed to feel like that, but that's just how it feels for me personally. But, you know, this gun is really good. I think it's, from what I've used, I can confidently say it's top 3. I've used pretty much every SMG. I think the only SMG I have not used is the Sten, and even then I haven't really heard too many good things about the Sten. I've used it off the ground and it's pretty solid, but I would definitely feel comfortable putting the Type-100 in the top 3 in terms of Vanguard SMGs. Like, if we're talking like the whole meta, or not meta, the whole Warzone SMG category, then I mean that can get kind of tricky. But in terms of Vanguard SMGs, Type-100 is top 3 without a question. But anyways, man, with that being said, let's get into the MP-40 and stats. And here we have the recoil pattern for the MP-40. It's actually completely the opposite of what the Type-100 is. With the Type-100, it goes to the left, and then with the MP-40, it starts going to the right. And actually, a trait that these two share is the fact that they're pretty low recoil and pretty good at, decent, not good, but pretty decent at range. The Type-100, though, I think that kind of, actually both of these guns would vary how you build your class setup. But if you have a decent class setup for both these weapons, you'll be pretty solid at range. But again, these are SMGs. We're not here to use these in my range. That's why we have ARs. But anyways, man, for the first stat that I want to talk about is the fire rate. Now, for the Type-100, we have a 750 RPM. And then for the MP-40, we have a 600 RPM. That's all base fire rate, no attachments added. And it's actually kind of surprising that the Type-100 has such a fast fire rate. It really doesn't seem like it has a faster fire rate than an MP-40, or not that much faster, like not significantly faster. I know, granted, I've been using the MP-40 with a lot of fire rate attachments, but even with the base MP-40, like, it's not fast, obviously, but the Type-100 doesn't seem that fast either. And I have the recoil booster, and I think the mag helps it have more fire rate, like, and yet it doesn't seem like it statistically has more fire rate than the MP-40, yet it doesn't seem like it, because it just doesn't sound like it shoots as fast as an MP-40. Like, if you take a look at the clips of this MP-40 compared to that Type-100, like, the fire rates don't seem similar at all. But statistically and on paper, the Type-100 has a faster fire rate. Now this time, as opposed to the PPSH, the damage is a little bit more closer. The PPSH had a way faster fire rate than that MP-40, but it was significantly weaker than MP-40. Whereas the Type-100 is still weaker, but it sacrifices a little bit of fire rate just to have a little bit more damage on the MP-40. So, speaking of that damage, for the Type-100 for 0 to 14 meters, we have 44 damage to the head, 39 to the neck, 30 to the chest and stomach, and then 28 to the extremities. And then for the MP-40 for 0 to 13 meters, we have 59 damage to the head, 42 to the neck, 36 to the chest, 33 to the stomach, and then 30 to the extremities. So obviously the MP-40 still has a significant, I won't say significant, or in the headshot department, it's a significant difference. But for the rest of the body, it's not too crazy. Like the MP-40 was, I want to say double, but it was a significant margin in comparison to a PPSH. Whereas this time around, the Type-100 is a little bit more closer, except for the head. And it just allows for a more balanced comparison just versus one another. And like I mentioned earlier, I still believe that the Type-100 is a very as close as you're going to get to an MP-40 without actually using an MP-40, if that makes any sense. And I mean, that just kind of proves it. But anyways, moving on to the damage over range. For 14 to 18 meters for the Type-100, we have 35 damage to the head, 30 to the neck, 24 to the chest and stomach, and 22 to the extremities. Whereas the MP-40 has 47 damage to the, for the MP-40, 13 16 meters, 47 damage to the head, 33 to the neck, 28 to the chest, 27 to the stomach, and 24 to the extremities. Now, the damage drop-off is a lot more noticeable in the Type-100 than it is the MP-40. The MP-40 still has pretty solid damage at that like medium range, whereas the Type-100 kind of starts to, you start to definitely notice the fallout in just the stats, and I guess in performance as well. Because that MP-40, man, like I'm telling you, you can use that gun at range. I've seen it, I've done it. Like that gun, you can do it. The Type-100 can get a little weird, because you can start losing control as well, and the damage is just not hitting, and you put yourself in a tough situation. And whereas the MP-40, especially if you have a sight, like you could basically use that as a mini AR. There's plenty of examples out there, and you've probably shared these experiences where the MP-40, you just see it as a long range threat sometimes. It's weird, but it's possible. But anyways, man, speaking of even more long range, for the longer ranges of these SMGs, for 18 meters and above, for the Type-100, damage-wise, we have 28 to the head, 25 to the neck, 19 to the chest and stomach, and then 18 to the extremities. A clear, like, damage up there from 0 to 14 to now 18 meters. So, like, that 4-meter difference, the drop-up is absurd. But anyways, moving on over to the MP-40, 16 meters and above, we have 41 to the head, 29 to the neck, 25 to the chest, 23 to the stomach, and 20 to the extremities. The damage drop is also there, but it doesn't seem as noticeable considering the fact that we still have 41 damage to the head and 29 to the neck, and even 25 to the chest. Like, that isn't too, like, crazy. That's still somewhat decent considering the fact that you're using SMG at a pretty, far distance for what that gun is capable of doing. And the fact that the damage isn't completely just destroyed as it is with the Type-100 or PPSH, like, that's pretty impressive. And again, the MP-40, man, it could definitely do it, man. Like, if you find yourself out of ammo on your primary weapon and you only got an MP-40, man, bro, don't be afraid to shoot. I'm telling you, you might be surprised on what that gun can do. I know you guys already know what I'm talking about, but for people that don't know, man, trust it, because it could get you out of situations you didn't even think it would be able to. But in conclusion, I'm still going to be picking the MP-40 over the Type-100 in this specific comparison. Now, that's not to say that Type-100 is completely like terrible or not better than the MP-40. It's right there. In my opinion, it's right there. I would even probably put it over the Owen gun, and I love the Owen gun. I love the Owen gun. That's probably one of my favorite SMGs at the moment. But a Type-100, man, like this gun is really, really good. And if I could just get that class setup to make it a little bit faster, I could see myself using it over the MP-40. And don't shy away from it, man. The Type-100 is definitely a good alternative to an MP-40. If you don't want to use an MP-40, I would definitely recommend it if you can get the correct class setup. But yeah, man, with that being said, though, let me know what you guys think about both of these guns, which one you prefer and why, and I'll talk to you guys later. I'm out. Peace.